Say it again. I misheard you.
I never asked you to wait.
8 years, Daniel.
I thought we were building for God.
So did I. Welcome to Labari Haven, home of African stories that stay with you.
If you think you already know what just happened and how they got here, drop your guess in the comments. I can promise you this though, you will be surprised. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, drop a like, and let's get to the root of this matter. There was nobody on Kingsgate University campus who hadn't at least once heard of Amara, the 21-year-old with skin the color of polished mahogany and a low bun she never seemed to change, whose lips were always moving quietly in prayer, even on an ordinary Tuesday morning, when she was only walking from her hostel to the faculty building with a stack of textbooks pressed to her chest. She was the kind of girl lecturers remembered by name and classmates borrowed notes from without shame, because Amara never made anyone feel small for needing help. Before there was a ministry building or an offering basket, or a Sunday program printed on glossy paper, there was just a girl who talked to God in hallways because she hadn't found a quiet enough room. It happened one ordinary morning, much like this one. Amara noticed a younger student crying by the stairwell, headphones in, trying to hide her face from a corridor of people rushing past her without seeing her at all. Amara hesitated for a second. Then she walked over and sat beside her, without a word first, just presence. "You don't have to tell me anything," she said gently. "No performance in it." Cautiously, the crying girl looked at her, startled by the sincerity in it, by the lack of demand. Cautiously, she let her head fall onto Amara's shoulder and wept, and Amara held her there. And in that small, unremarkable stairwell, we see the first time the thing that would come to define the next several years of her life. How freely she gave herself away, without ever checking first what it would cost her. People will tell you a calling is a moment, a lightning strike, a voice from heaven splitting the sky open. Amara's was quieter than that. Hers was 100 small mornings of choosing to notice the people everyone else walked past. That night, in a room with a single bed, a small reading lamp and a worn Bible, whose margins were crowded with careful, tiny handwriting, Amara knelt beside her bed. She was not performing piety for anyone. She was completely alone, completely unguarded, and completely hers to give. "Lord," she whispered, and the prayer was raw and unrehearsed. "I don't know what you want to do with my life, but whatever it is, don't let me waste it chasing what looks good. Let me chase what's real." She was 21 years old, and she meant every word of it. She did not yet know that meaning a prayer and living out its answer are two very different assignments.
The fellowship met under a mango tree at the edge of campus, in the hour when the sun surrenders its heat and the sky starts arguing itself over what color to become. A generator hummed somewhere behind a row of plastic chairs, powering a single speaker that would cut out twice before the evening was through. And nobody in that small crowd of 40 students seemed to mind, because whatever was burning in that gathering was nothing to do with electricity. At the front, with a guitar strung across his shoulder and sweat already collecting at his collar, stood Pastor Daniel. Not yet the polished man he would one day become. Still rough at the edges, still hungry in a way that made people lean forward when he spoke. "I don't have much to offer you people," he told them, his voice cracking with an earnestness no amount of training could fake. "I don't have a big church. I don't have a big name. What I have is a vision that won't let me sleep. God showed me a harvest field on this campus, and I need laborers, not spectators, laborers." Amara, seated near the back, felt something tighten in her chest, and she would later insist it was not romantic, that it was something older than that: recognition. That particular jolt of meeting someone running the same race you thought you had been running alone. After the meeting, while Daniel was still packing away his guitar, hands calloused, shirt marked with sweat rings, Amara walked up to him without any of the shyness the moment seemed to call for. "You said you need laborers," she said.
I don't know what that means practically, but I'm offering, whatever it looks like. Daniel looked up, mildly caught off guard by her bluntness. Just like that? You don't even know me? I don't need to know you, Amara answered. I need to know if this is really from God, and I think it is. So count me in. He studied her a bit too long, not romantically, more like a man recognizing rare material when it walks up and hands itself to him. Then welcome to the labor, he said. Neither of them knew yet that that sentence would become the architecture of the next 8 years of her life. Welcome to the labor. It sounded like an invitation. It would in time reveal itself as a warning too. What followed was not glamorous. Building something sacred rarely is. It was Amara knocking on hostel doors, coaxing reluctant students out to fellowship. It was Amara seated across a first year, Bible open between them, patiently walking a confused face towards understanding. It was Amara sweeping dust off a bare field before visitors arrived, so no one would sit in debt, sleeves rolled to her elbows, sweat gathering at her hairline, Amara counting coins by candlelight on a wobbling wooden table and thanking God for every single one, because it added up to almost nothing, and almost nothing was still something. Nobody tells you that building something sacred is mostly unglamorous work, that it is staying behind long after everyone else has gone home because one's soul is still tangled in a question too frightened to be asked in public. One evening, that soul belonged to a guarded young man named Jude, arms crossed across his chest like a barricade. I don't know why I'm even talking to you, he told her. Church people always want something from you eventually. I don't want anything from you, Jude, Amara said, steady, unbothered by the wall he'd put up. I just noticed you keep coming and keep sitting at the back like you're ready to run. I wanted to ask what you're running from. A long silence stretched between them before his shoulders finally dropped just a little. My father used to say God only loves people who have their life together, he admitted, quieter now. I don't have my life together. Then you're exactly who this was built for, Amara told him, without a trace of pity in it, only conviction. Jude gave his life to Christ 3 weeks later. Today, he sits in the front pew with his wife and 2 children, and every time Amara sees him there, she remembers that conversation and remembers exactly why she said yes to the labor the first time. Not for what it would earn her, for what it could rescue. There were harder nights too. One of them found Daniel pacing a cramped one-room office, a fist of unpaid bills crumpled in his hand, while Amara sat calmly at a small table, sorting receipts into neat piles. We can't pay for the whole next month, he said, dragging a hand down his face. I don't know what to tell these people. Then we hold service under the tree again, Amara answered without even looking up. It's not the building that carries the anointing, Daniel. It's obedience. The tree didn't stop God from showing up the first time. Daniel stopped pacing. He looked at her properly then, the way a man looks at someone who has just handed him back his own courage. I don't know what I would do without you in this, he admitted quietly. You'd figure it out, Amara said, deflecting with an easy smile. God would still be God without me. I just get the honor of watching him walk up close. She meant every word of that sentence when she said it. Whatever came later did not begin as a lie told to herself in that small room. It began somewhere else, somewhere quieter and far more dangerous than a lie.
Years unfolded the ministry from a mango tree gathering into a rented canopy over white padded benches. And it was under that canopy, one Sunday afternoon after service, that Amara first heard it out loud. She was stacking hymn books when 2 church women a few feet away, folding tablecloths, let their voices carry farther than they meant to. Have you noticed how Pastor never makes a decision without calling Amara first? One of them said, laughing. Even the color of the church banners, he asked her opinion. The other replied, teasing. That's not friendship again now. That's something else waiting to happen. God would just do it one day and surprise all of us. Watch and see. Amara kept stacking hymn books. Her hands did not stop moving, but her eyes flicked just once towards Daniel, who was laughing with a group of new converts across the compound, utterly unaware of the conversation happening 30 feet from him. Her expression, for anyone watching closely, sat somewhere between amusement and something she did not yet have a name for. She laughed the comment off in her head before she let herself think about it seriously. Of course they'd say that. People need a love story to explain why two people work well together. It is easier for them to believe two people can simply share a purpose and nothing more. Walking home that evening, under a sky sliding from orange into violet, Amara caught herself replaying the women's words anyway. Not because she believed them, but because for one unguarded second, she wondered what it would feel like if they were right. She stopped under a streetlight, stood there a moment too long, then shook her head, physically shaking the thought loose, and kept walking. She buried it that night, told herself it was nothing, a stray thought everyone has and nobody acts on. What she did not yet understand was that a seed does not need permission to root. It only needs soil. And soil, quiet and undisturbed, was exactly what her heart had quietly become. Some years later, on a rug in Amara's small apartment, over cups of zobo and the kind of comfortable silence only old friends can hold, Tolu studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Can I ask you something and you won't vex?" "When has that warning ever stopped you?" Amara laughed. 8 years, Amara, Tolu said, half joking, half not. 8 years you've poured into this ministry. You turned down that engineer that liked you back in year 2 because you said your focus was the vision. You turned down transferring to that bigger church that offered you a paid administrative role because you said your loyalty was here. At what point does the vision start owing you something back? "Tolu," she said a little too quickly, "I didn't do any of that expecting payment." "I know you didn't," Tolu said gently, not accusing, only concerned. "I'm asking you if you've noticed that you and Daniel have basically built a marriage's worth of partnership without the marriage part. Doesn't that ever sit strange in your chest?" Amara looked down into her cup, swirling the liquid slowly, and did not answer right away. Tolu had not planted a lie in her that night. She wasn't trying to manipulate anything. She loved Amara, and love sometimes asks the questions we train ourselves never to ask out loud. But a question once spoken into open air cannot be unheard. It settles into you and waits. "It doesn't sit strange," Amara said, and her own voice did not fully convince her. "We're partners in the vision. That's all it's ever been." "Okay," Tolu said softly, watching her friend closely. "I believe you." She did not entirely, but she let it go, out of love rather than conviction. And Amara, walking Tolu to the gate later that night, believed herself too, almost completely. It would only be later that she could look back and hear the crack in her own voice that night, a crack she had mistaken at the time for calm.
There were so many good years folded into the ones that ache. And this story would be dishonest if it let you forget that, because they mattered, and without them, the ache that follows would make no sense at all. There was Amara leading a women's discipleship class, 20 faces turned toward her, hanging on every word. There was Amara and Daniel praying backstage for a church anniversary service, heads bowed, hands not touching, purely reverent. There was Amara sitting through the night at a hospital bedside with a grieving widow who had nobody else. There was the church board handing her a plaque that read, "Pillar of Faithful Service," and her face lighting with joy too uncomplicated to fake. One afternoon, in a small office behind the main hall, Daniel looked up from his desk as she walked in with a folder of documents. "Ah, my right hand," he said, warm and familiar. "Tell me you have the outreach numbers." 212 new contacts from the crusade, 43 already confirmed for the follow-up class, she said, setting the folder down. "I don't know how you keep track of all this," Daniel marveled. "Honestly, Amara, this ministry runs because you refuse to let it fall apart in the details I forget." "That's what partnership means," she said easily, deflecting as always. "You dream it, I help hold it steady." Daniel smiled at her then, warm and unguarded, the smile of a man who trusted completely and saw nothing complicated in that trust. For a season, Amara believed she had found the safest kind of love there is, the kind that asks nothing and gives everything freely. What she did not yet understand was that safety without a name has a way of quietly curdling into hope, and hope left unspoken for too long has a way of writing its own conclusion. It was after a combined Sunday service, chairs were still being folded, decorations from a recent anniversary program not yet taken down, that the joke found her again, this time with sharper teeth. Amara stood near a small table packing leftover food into containers, her back half turned to a small cluster of church members whose conversation had grown loud with the warmth of the day. "Did you see how Pastor Daniel and Minister Amara coordinated today?" One of them laughed. "Even their outfits. Somebody should just hurry up and do the needful." "I'm telling you," another added, grinning, "they will be our very own Daddy Paul and Mommy Becky. Watch this space. The kingdom of hell will not survive that union." Laughter rippled through the small group. Amara's hands stilled over the food container. She did not turn around. Her face caught in profile moved through something complicated in under 2 seconds. Warmth first, at the compliment folded inside the joke, then something sharper and far more unsettling underneath it. She had heard versions of this 100 times before, but something about that particular afternoon, the way the words landed in the middle of her chest instead of sliding past her ears the way they used to, told her something in her had shifted without asking her permission first. She stepped outside the hall alone soon after, leaning against the cool concrete wall, eyes closed, breathing slower than normal, as though trying to talk her own heart down from somewhere it had climbed without her. "Why did that feel good to hear?" she whispered to herself, and the question frightened her more than the joke had. She had no answer for herself, only the uncomfortable, undeniable truth that somewhere between the tree they had once prayed under and the hall they now celebrated in, she had stopped hearing those jokes as noise. She had started quietly, secretly, hoping they might be prophecy. Weeks later, at a leaders' retreat dinner lit by warm string lights, Amara sat alone for a moment at a table near the back, sipping water, watching the room with quiet fondness. Nearby, just out of clear sightline but well within earshot, a small group of leadership team members had grown loose with laughter and a few drinks. Honestly, if Pastor doesn't marry Amara, who else does this man think he's going to marry? Who else has poured this much into his vision? God will just wake him up one morning and open his eyes, another agreed, and the laughter around the table rose with it. Amara's cup stopped halfway to her lips. The room seemed to slow around her, the chatter fading into a dull ring in her ears, her chest tightening with a breath she didn't mean to catch. This was not the first time she had heard something like it. It was the first time it landed like a verdict instead of a joke. It is one thing to overhear a joke once and let it pass through you like wind through a window. It is another thing entirely when the same words return again and again until they no longer sound like other people's speculation, until they start to sound like a question your own heart has been too afraid to ask out loud. Who else does this man think he's going to marry? She did not choose to carry that sentence home with her that night. It simply refused to let go of her hand. Later, walking to her car, forcing a smile over something trembling beneath it, a colleague called out to her, "Amara, you are not driving off without saying goodbye to Pastor now, are you?" "Ah, never," she laughed, light and practiced. "Let me go and find him." She walked toward Daniel, who stood deep in warm conversation with an elderly church mother, and waited at the edge of it, studying him in that brief pause, not romantically staged, searching, as though trying to read an answer of a face that did not know it was being asked a question. She laughed with everyone that night. She rebuked the leaders gently, the way ministry circles teach you to deflect such comments with a scripture and a smile.
None of them knew that behind her smile, a question had just been born that she would not be able to unbirth no matter how hard she tried.
Later that night, in the dim lamplight of her bedroom, Amara sat at her small dressing table, removing her earrings slowly, mechanically, her reflection watching her back with an unusual stillness. The room held nothing but the low hum of a standing fan and the residue of a loud day settling into its corners like dust after a storm. She set the earrings down, stared at her own face in the mirror for a long moment, her fingers curled slowly against the table. "Lord, is this what you meant?" she said, barely above a whisper. She closed her eyes, and the years rose up behind them in flashes, quick and disorienting. The mango tree, the counted coins, Jude's first tears, Daniel's grateful smile, the whispered comparisons layered one over another until they blurred into a single ache. "Lord, did I give my life to a vision, or did I give my life to a man and call it a vision because it was safer to say it that way?" Her eyes opened. She looked almost frightened of herself, of the question she had just spoken aloud for the first time in 8 years. Her hand pressed briefly over her mouth as if she could take the words back. It was too late. They were already loose in the room. She had not asked that question out of entitlement. She had asked it out of exhaustion. 8 years of a love she had never given a name to had finally demanded she look directly at it, and she was terrified of what she would find if she did. She rose from the dressing table and crossed to a small wooden box on top of her wardrobe, one that clearly had not been opened in years. Dust settled soft along its lid. She blew it off gently, lifted the lid, and drew out an old journal, its cover worn soft with age, its corners curled from handling long since stopped. She sat on the edge of her bed and opened it slowly, carefully, the way you open something sacred. Her own handwriting looked back at her from the page, younger, rounder, written by a girl who had not yet learned to want anything back. "Lord, I will partner with this vision as long as you ask me. I don't need to know what it will cost me. I only need to know it is you who is asking." Her fingers traced the ink slowly. Her eyes filled, not with sadness exactly, but with something more complicated. Recognition. Grief for a version of herself who had asked for nothing, standing face to face now with a version of herself that had quietly begun to want something back. "Was there more to this partnership, Lord?" she whispered again, to the empty room, to God, to herself. She closed the journal and held it against her chest, staring straight ahead, at nothing, at everything. The lamp flickered once. Somewhere outside, a dog barked, and then the night went quiet again. She did not sleep that night. Somewhere between 1 and 4 in the morning, sitting with that old journal pressed to her chest, a decision formed in her that she did not fully examine at the time. If there was more to this partnership, then someone had to help Daniel see it too. She told herself it was conviction. She told herself it was clarity. What she could not have known that night was that she had just taken the first quiet step toward the very thing that would one day break her. Some vows we make to God, others we make to ourselves without even realizing it. That night, Amara made both, and only one of them was ever safe to keep. If this first part resonated with you the way I think it did, please share how in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. Tell me honestly, what do you expect in part 2? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe if you're new here, and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. I'll see you in the next one.